Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to this channel and turn the bell on to support. Now back to the video. Today we will be talking about the infamous case which haunted L.A. in the 40s and for decades to come. We will be discussing the case of the Black Dahlia. To begin, it was the early morning of January 15, 1947. A woman named Betty Bersinger walked along Norton Avenue in Los Angeles when suddenly she stumbled across a horrific scene. Bersinger found the deceased body of a woman. At first, due to the state of decomposition and its wide appearance, she believed it was a mannequin. However, after realizing what it was, Bersinger quickly contacted the authorities. When investigators arrived at the scene, they found a tragedy. The victim's body had been cut in half at the waist, sliced at the mouth from ear to ear, and completely lifeless with a paper-white appearance. There was no blood found on the scene, indicating that the body was moved. News quickly spread around LA, and it was not long before the body was identified. The victim was a woman by the name of Elizabeth Short. Short was a 22-year-old waitress and aspiring actress who had moved to LA with hopes of accomplishing her dreams in the Hollywood scene. This gave the police a lead as to why someone would want Short gone. When the body was taken to the lab, it showed no signs of trauma to internal organs or bones. This surgical precision implied whomever had done this was an experienced surgeon. 9 days went by and a new clue would give police further information. They had received an envelope which held a letter made from cut newspaper ads to avoid handwriting identification. This envelope also contained many of Short's belongings, like short snapshots, her social security card, her birth certificate, and an address book with several pages missing. In the following days to come, the police would receive many more letters, adding up to a total of 13, each signed Black Dahlia Avenger. However, police found these letters had been rubbed with gasoline in order to leave free of any trace like fingerprints. They had little evidence gathered so far. The letters they received gave them no clues in which direction to take the case. They couldn't trace them or any possible person who may have written them. They needed to start working faster in order to find a lead and a possible killer to bring justice to Short, so they decided to start questioning people. Hundreds were questioned and most cleared. That's until they got a first break in the case and finally had a convincing suspect. A man by the name of Robert Manley. Manley had driven Short from San Diego to LA. He had helped check into a hotel in downtown LA, the Biltmore Hotel. Manley, however, had returned to San Diego before her death and, when interviewed by police, had passed a polygraph test. Therefore, he was ruled out as a suspect. After no success with Manley, the authorities moved on to their next suspect. His name was Joseph Dumas. Dumas was a 29-year-old military man. He told police he had been on a date with Short on January 9, just days before her body had been discovered. Not only did Dumas claim to have gone on a date with Short before her murder, he also confessed to the murder. When questioned by investigators, Dumas stated that he was drunk in San Francisco with Short and had suffered a mental blackout during which he had brutally killed her. However, there were many holes in his story. He didn't want to describe what he had done to her and changed his version of what had occurred many times. He was unable to explain how he had made it to LA and returned to his military base Fort Dix, located in New Jersey, in the span of a few days. After more investigation, authorities found that Dumas had been at his military base, therefore making it impossible for him to be Short's killer, and so he was ruled out as a suspect. Investigators began paying more attention to the state of the body's precise surgical incisions, which meant they needed to find a suspect capable of performing such precision. This led them to a man named George Hodel. Hodel was considered a suspect by investigators in the Dahlia case for a multitude of reasons. The first one having to do with the precise cuts found on the victim's body. Hodel was an experienced surgeon. He had attended the University of Berkeley and had graduated pre-med in the year 1932. He immediately enrolled in medical school at the University of California and received his medical degree in the year of 1936. He even ran LA County's venereal disease clinic. Hodel was highly experienced and fully capable of the wounds found on Short's body. Not only that, but he had been a previous suspect in another case. This was the case of Ruth Spaulding. Spaulding was Hodel's former secretary. She worked for him at Hodel's venereal disease clinic. However, in the year 1945, Spaulding was found dead at her home in West 2nd Street. Spaulding had swallowed sleeping pills in what appeared to be a suicide attempt. Police believed there had been foul play and that Spaulding had been poisoned, but due to the lack of evidence, her death was ruled as suicide. Given Hodell's past and all the evidence they had of his capability of committing a crime like this, investigators decided to plant listening devices in Hodell's home to see if they could find any more information Hodell wasn't giving them that would connect him to the murder. And they would find some suspicious statements. During these recordings Hodell was heard stating, quote, "Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia. They couldn't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary anymore because she's dead." This was very suspicious and raised many flags. However, it wasn't considered a confession and investigators had no physical evidence connecting him to the crime, therefore Hodell was never officially convicted. Decades later. In the year 1999, now retired former detective Steve Hodell began investigating the case. His name may sound familiar because Steve Hodell was the son of former Dahlia suspect George Hodell. Steve was only 5 at the time of the Dahlia murder. Yet his experience in criminology led him to believe his father had something to do with the crime. Steve had many reasons for this. To start off, Steve claims his father had a secret room which no children were allowed in. It is unclear exactly what would go down in this room and who he would let enter. Not only this, but Steve had been accused by his 14-year-old daughter Tamer Nace Hodell of sexual abuse resulting in a pregnancy which she decided to terminate. However, George Hodell was acquitted after a 3-week-long jury trial. Another reason why Steve believed his father to be the murderer was because he found a picture his father had that highly resembled Elizabeth Short. When placed side by side, many claim there is a clear resemblance between the two, while others say they hold no similarities and they are clearly two different individuals. This theory was later proven wrong. The woman in the picture is not Elizabeth Short and it is unknown who the mystery woman is. But by far the most suspicious evidence found was when Steve investigated his father's home with search dogs and found human remains in the property. But this was private property and Steve was forced to stop his investigation. Even though these weren't connected to Short, it proved George Hodell hid many secrets. Possibly the Dahlia being amongst them. Despite all the staggering evidence stacked against George Hodell, it was never enough to bring him to court. Therefore Hodell was never convicted for the crime of the Dahlia or any other case he was accused of or considered a suspect in. Hodell lived a long life and passed away in the year 1999 at the age of 91. Hodell remains the most probable suspect in the Dahlia case to this day. Many believe it's possible Hodell may have paid off the LAPD. At the time of the investigation, the Los Angeles Police Department was notoriously corrupt and would often accept payments. On the other hand, this could just be a classic case of police incompetence where not enough efforts were done to bring a victim justice. Regarding the case in general, the person responsible for the crime and Elizabeth Short's death has not yet been found.